So the Gemara cites a brisa that discusses which materials a tanner can keep and which materials he has to return to the owner. If he gives one's hides to a tanner, meaning the person that owns the leather, the trimming of the hides and the torn off wool belong to the owner. But the wool that comes out of the water rinse belongs to the tanner. So obviously only a minuscule amount is removed in the washing process, and the owner relinquishes any use of it. But it really is minuscule. So the Gemara cites the clause of the Mishnah that reads, the launderer takes out 3 threads, okay, and they belong to him. But if it was black on white, he may take off all the black threads and they belong to him. And the reason it being is that it has to be physically pleasing to the garment itself. And if those additional threads make a white garment have a black edging, it's certainly not going to be attractive, so then the owner wouldn't mind. So the Gemara comments that Rav Yehuda said the launderer is called a katsara, and that which he shortens, because the word katsara, shortening, he takes for himself. So what does this actually mean? Is like it's actually an Aramaic name, and it's from the root word meaning short. So it's a play of words that Rav Yehuda says that the Mishnah's law is that a launderer takes extra threads at the end of the garment, thereby shortening it, and it's implied that he's allowed to do it because it's a pun on the word launderer and shortener. And why? Because garments are often shrink when laundered, just as a matter of interest, especially in those days. When you're buying garments today, they're pre-washed. So Rav Yehuda said everything, even the threads that the launderer will generally remove, counts with respect to the measurement of placing of the techelet on the tzitzit. And he said, my son Yitzchak was particular regarding these threads and removes them before attaching tzitzit. So obviously, although we learned in our Mishnah that a launderer may take off the threads at the issue of the garment and keep them for himself, in the event that he didn't do so, those threads are considered part of the garment and are included in the measurement. So we begin measuring this distance from what is presently the edge of the garment, not from where the edge would be if the launderer removes those threads. Now, obviously, when it uses the term techeles, we're not talking about the blue-dyed thread here. It's more of a general name to denote threads of the tzitzit, both the white and the blue. Now, it's not clear, according to Rashi, why Rav Yitzchak was particular to remove those threads. Rav Yitzchak was the son of Rabbi Yehuda, but there was a halachic concern. He was uncertain as to whether the threads that were destined to be removed from the garment should be considered to be part of the garment or not. And in the event of the launderer, in that case, if he didn't remove them, he would remove them himself before attaching the tzitzit to the garment. So he just held at a greater level of stringency. As far as that's concerned, the Gemara cites the next part of the Mishnah. If a tailor left over enough thread to sew with, it belongs to the owner. So the Gemara says, well, actually, how much is enough to sew with? And the Gemara answers, Rabbi Asi has a solution, and he said there's an amount of thread equal to a needle's length and a length beyond the knee. Meaning, you can't sew normally when the remaining thread is exactly a needle's length. You need a little bit more, because after passing the needle and thread through the two materials you're sewing together, it's going to be impossible to turn the needle around and re-enter the fabric without pulling the thread out. So you need obviously just a little bit more than that. So the Gemara resolves the inquiry because it seems to contradict our Mishnah that seemed to say slightly otherwise. And it says, look, come learn a resolution to this matter, because it was taught in a brisa regarding a tailor who left over a length of thread less than the amount necessary to sew with, or he left over a piece of cloth less than 3 finger breadths by 3 finger breadths width and height. The law is as follows. When the owner is particular about them, they belong to the owner. When the owner is not particular about them, they belong to the tailor. So if you're going to say that enough thread to sew, which means a needle's length and the length beyond a needle is equal to another needle's length, it's understandable. Because less than an amount can still fit for stitching a loop to the edge of a garment when placing it on the tentering frame. So we also said that when we were dealing with that picture of that frame, if you remember, where the fabric is stretched. I'll just share my screen a second. We were talking about this particular frame over here, that you might have just enough, but it would create certain problems. Just incidentally, part of the weaving process is weft and ways, obviously horizontal and vertical patterning, and then you've got a warp and a weft. A warp is smaller than a weft. As Kevin would say, it's not if you warped, it's what's weft that counts. Okay. Now, these two things here with bobbins, put them at different distances, and it helps you when you have to do weaving. And these are the sort of bobbins that you put in between. And we already said that if the tailor sells that and he's a day laborer, you can be sure it's stolen. So what we're saying is, if you say there's enough thread to sew with, it means the needle's length in a minute amount beyond the needle. So what's less than this amount fit for? Why would the owner even want it? Rather learn from here that enough thread to sew with means the needle's length and the length beyond the needle equal to another needle's length. So it's two needles length, so you can go backwards and forwards and a little bit extra. Indeed, learn from here, this is what Rav Asi meant. And he said it's exactly two needle lengths. So there's the next part of the Mishnah. And there we're dealing with a case of shavings, wood shavings from a carpenter. So whatever a carpenter removes with an adzai, which is a blade at right angles, it's almost like using to plane wood, where you've got thin veneers taken off. That belongs to him. But if he starts to use a mache or a hatchet or an axe or anything like that, they belong to the owner, because a substantial amount of wood is chopped off. And the Gemara sees there's a contradiction between our Mishnah's ruling and the Brisa, because it contrasts it, and it says in the Brisa, whatever shavings a carpenter removes with an adzai and whatever pieces of wood are severed off with a saw, they belong to the owner. But sawdust that falls out from under a drill, or the shavings from under a plane, where you've got a planing wood, or the sawdust that is sewn away with the saw, these belong to the carpenter. So our Mishnah said basically that the shavings of an adzai belong to the carpenter, but the Brisa says they belong to the owner. So the Gemara answers with the opinion of Rabbi, said, listen, if you look in the place where the Tana of our Mishnah was living, and the time period, there were two kinds of chopping. There was a larger one, like an axe, and a smaller one called an adzai. But in the place where you have the Tana of the Brisa, which is a different time period, a different location, there was only one chopping tool, and it's a larger one, and it was also called an adzai. So when our Mishnah says that the shavings of an adzai belong to the carpenter, the reference is to a small machine whose shavings are very fine and minute, and it doesn't have much value. But when the Brisa uses the shavings of an adzai, it belongs, and it says it belongs to the owner. It's obviously where it's like a large adzai, which they said is the equivalent to an axe, whose shavings are thick and a substantial amount of wood gets cut off. So the Gemara cites the last part of the Mishnah. However, if he was working on it at the owner's premises, even the sawdust belongs to the owner. Because as we said with Rashba, what determines the fact of if the materials belong to the owner or the carpenter, according to the Tosfot opinion, is that where is the project undertaken? If it's at the owner's premises, all of it belongs to the owner. But if it's done at the workshop of the contractor, in that particular case, it belongs to the contractor, providing there's not a substantial amount of wood loss, because the cost to schlep it and transport it is too much. Obviously, if it's a hatchet or there's a substantial piece of wood, that's considered theft. And we also said it's not always about the concept of a contractor and day laborer, according to the Rashba. It's where this is going to take place. The premises dictate. We just say generally a day or hourly wage earner doesn't have premises and therefore can be assumed he works at the owner, so therefore the owner keeps what's in his premises. So the rabbis taught in the Brisa, those who chisel stones, they basically square the stones and make them smooth to prepare for building. They're brickwork, basically. And they're not subject to the prohibition against theft. Okay? In other words, they can keep for themselves the pieces of stone that they chisel off. Those who prune trees, who prune grapevines, or who prune thorn bushes, who weed unwanted vegetation from amongst growing grains, who prune vegetables, when the owner is particular about them, they are subject to the prohibition against theft. But when the owner is not particular about them, they belong to the worker. So in other words, when vegetables are growing too closely together, one is removed from the middle to allow the remaining vegetables more space to spread out and expand. So then that vegetable in the middle, when the owner is not particular, the gardener can keep it. If he is, he can't. Same thing when there's a tree with too many branches, they cut off some to allow more room for others to grow. Now, as far as that's concerned, the Gemara cites an Amoraic ruling. Rav Yehuda says, hops and green grain are not subject to the prohibition against theft. In other words, they're young ears of grain that haven't ripened. And Rav Yehuda appears to be saying that it's permitted for anyone, even one who is not working a field, to enter another person's field and take those hops or green grain. So the Yad Shlomo doesn't agree, since it's a bit puzzling. Why should a person be permitted to take green grain and thereby prevent it from growing into mature grain where the owner would want that? Why would you pick it prematurely? So the Gemara in Bava Kamma 58b, if you remember, holds one liable to damages if your animal ate the green grain of another person's field, because you prevented it from fully ripening. It's as if you've damaged him either way. So what happens is the Yashar Shlomo suggests that perhaps the reference here is to green grain that grew on its own, and it would never have developed into quality grain. We must be talking about that. Now, according to Rashba, the Gemara may be understood maybe even much more simply. He explains that it's customary for animal owners to send their livestock into the fields to eat green grain. And when they do so, the grain grows better than if the animals had not grazed upon them. Because what happened is that their stomachs of the animals break it down, and when they excrete it with a feces, that adds to the nitrogen, and it's like manure, and the grain has been broken up in the animal's stomach, so it actually grows a lot better. I certainly wouldn't want that grain, but everybody's different. Accordingly, in a place where there are no animals, the owner of a field isn't particular if someone lets his livestock graze there. To the contrary, the grain will grow better. However, if the field's owner has animals themselves, he would actually want to reserve his green grain for the grazing of his own livestock, because then he doesn't have to also feed them. So they get the one benefit of being fed and the other one of passing the grain through their system. So when they excrete it out, the grain grows better. And therefore, in a place where livestock is common, the field owners are going to be more particular that no one else graze the animals green grain, because they have to feed the animals privately. So in such a circumstance, the Gemara in 58b holds somebody liable for eating somebody else's green grain. Okay? Now, basically, as Rav Yehuda says, hops and green grains are not subject to the prohibition against theft. But in a place where the owners are particular that others not take their hops or green grain, they're subject to the prohibition against theft, because it's all about the owner's compliance. Now, you must remember, we go through the general rule of what owners deem to be fair, because if you're dealing with somebody that's mentally ill and is just wants to count sawdust that the contractor might keep, whoopee twang, then we say we don't hold by this opinion of this mentally ill deranged person, because if he's that pedantic, he doesn't follow the normal course of behavior. So the Gemara comments that was Ravina said, and the city of Meshchazia is a place where the owners are particular about taking these items because they owned animals which require good pasture, according to Rashi. So green grain was used for animal fodder. So, so as far as that's concerned, just something incidentally, there was this term that was used that Rashi added the word good at the end of the last comment, meaning that they wanted to have good grain. So why did Rashi add the word good? Because he's keeping with this principle that when you conclude a tractate, you have to end on a good, on a positive note. And because Bava Kamma is actually not a complete tractate by itself, it's part of a larger tractate with Bava Kamma, Bava Metzia, Bava Basra. And therefore, it doesn't have that word good that finishes with it because it's part of a three-part set. Okay, so that's something that you should just bear in mind. I just want to share one thing in the screen, if you can hang on for me, guys, 1 second.
So, Damon, you're following everything. You're going with the grain, eh?
Yeah, I'm going with the grain.
He's kind of weaving in between the grain, but anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So I just want to share one thing with you guys. Give me 1 second. And okay. Guys, I didn't think we'd get to this point.
This is the end.
This is the end. We shall return to you, Al-Gozel, Basra, and the tractate, which is the last chapter, and tractate Bava Kamma is concluded.
Amen.
Arthur, look a bit enthusiastic, man. Arthur.
Maybe he's not feeling great.
Arthur wasn't
okay. Arthur, I got a question about your grain joke. Okay. Can you sell the grain? You're going with grain?
We didn't hear that, Arthur.
Can you sell the grain if you're going with the grain?
Well, it will be going against the grain if you didn't, I guess.
If you're driving, you're going to weave in and out of traffic. Eh?
Now I'm going to ask each of you guys to do something for 2 minutes each, or maybe longer. Kevin has generally shared us amazing ideas, and
I can give another. I only shared part of that. I can give you.
So you can.
Didn't do all of it.
I want Gavin to talk. You to.
I just want to get the book quickly. Give me
Kevin. No. I want you to give something from your heart, Gavin. Also, Arthur. I know your heart hasn't been that good, which is why
I gave from my heart already. It's enough. You're taking enough from me. You want the rest of it? Hold on, let me give it to you. What concerns me, James, is I thought I'd never finish this in my lifetime. Then I would go. Now I finish it. What I got else to go? You know. Yeah. You said it'll take me to 120. You promised.
Now in 3-4 months' time, we're doing another one. This doesn't end.
Yeah, we got to Elo.
We have a break. It's a sabbatical, and then after that we start again.
So this is never ending. Or sabbatical?
A bit of both.
Okay, so
we're starting Bava Kamma again.
No, but we can also discuss which Masechta. But quickly, I want each of you guys to share something. Kevin, you've got yours ready, so share first.
Okay, so we were talking about positive speech yesterday. And it says here, here's quite appropriate. If someone shares a devout Torah or story which you know already, do not say, I've heard that already. Why spoil their enjoyment in sharing the idea? Perhaps you will gain some new insight from their telling. You know, I'll come back to that in a second. If you react hastily, Hashem can say to you, why can't you listen to the review of my holy words? Have you studied the entire Torah 101 times yet? By the way, the prayers you recited today seem very similar to the ones you said yesterday. Should I turn them down measure for measure because I heard them already? Now, I shared about a year or two ago, I think I sent one of our YouTube recordings to a certain person that I know very well, a wonderful human being, and quite a very from guy, extremely from. And he listened to what I said, and he said, you should have said this. She didn't say, that was lovely. He just said, he was just critical. And I mean, it didn't, we mustn't get bothered and let something like that derail us. But he just said, you should have said this, he didn't say, oh, it was a nice idea. Just like he was just only critical as if he knew better. But and that can make someone despondent and to chase them away from Yiddishkeit or make them unenthusiastic about learning. So we mustn't let that get to us. As I said, just encourage people. So if you've heard something before, say, great, fantastic. Or if you have something to add, say, look, you could have, it was wonderful what you said, but maybe next time you say it again, just add X, Y, Z to it.
Well, and I tell you, stop hanging around with mentally ill people, but please. I know you hang around with us, but we're your friends. I don't know who this
Damon,
is. This is strange.
Damon, I've got a problem. I've got a problem with that. It's my job.
Part of your work, aren't they?
They tell me the same thing over and over again, and I have to say to them, that's a nice idea. I actually have to agree with them, because if you actually, and you can learn something from this from the people who have dementia. Okay, if you try correct them or force them, or you say something negative, they'll come back at you much harder. But if you're with them and you agree with them, you say to them, yeah, no, that's fantastic. Okay, they go with the flow.
It's true. And when you feed a dementia patient and you've only got chicken and they say, I want meat, you say, no problem. And you take the plate away, you leave the room, you come back, you say, here's meat. No,
Yeah.
I'm serious. I know from experience.
Or my patient. I know. I was from my side as well.
Yeah, you don't fight with them. You actually just do a lot of diversion. And it's quite a skill.
It's kind of like, in about 2 minutes, they're not going to remember what they did anyway.
Yeah.
So, but it does take a lot of patience. I must admit.
It is, and sometimes you get upset.
It can drive me crazy.
And they say, get out, and you say, I'm leaving, you come back, you say, thank you for inviting me back. They say, it's a pleasure.
Yeah. And there was one guy, I was there, he told me, he thought I had the key, which I did, but I kind of like, he saw me and he told me to get out of his apartment. I said, no problem, I'm leaving now. I went out, I waited in the steps. He comes out, said, okay, let's go for a walk now. He went for a walk. He forgot what the argument was about.
They're classic. Listen, I just want to ask you, what author have you learned from doing this Bava Kamma? Have you enjoyed it at all? Have you not? Have you learned anything?
Yeah, I have learned a lot. I've learned that a lot of patience and a lot of effort will slowly get you through something and achieve end.
It's true.
I got from the stuff I got from also was the whole thing I learned is it's basically trying to make both parties happy at all times. Trying to find a nice equilibrium so people can live in peace. What's fair, what's not fair.
Yeah.
Like if somebody steals from you, you got to compensate them, but you got to compensate to the degree that you don't feel like you're out of. It's not really if that's still, more like if there's an accident. If there's if something accidentally happens, okay, it's not done on purpose. My car got out. whatever. It's not something you actually set your cow in because you didn't steal product. That's different. You try to find a happy medium
That's true.
of, I'll give you that, you give me this, and then we're both happy. Because you have to live in the same neighborhood.
Actually, that's that ending line
Not
is
the guy that
exactly
ate
it.
your cow,
Yeah,
moving out. Yeah.
no, that's true. Gav, what did you learn?
Yeah, no, so I've learned a few things, just very high level. So just very high level is that without a doubt, after going through Bava Kamma, you can clearly see that Hashem exists without a doubt. I mean, because no one can, no one who creates a religion is going to go write something as intense as this, with so many, it covers every single angle. I'm still completely mystified as to, I understand why it's written. I'm kind of mystified why the need for it, why the need for all these for all these cases is required. Because the fact is, if you believe in Hashem correctly and sincerely, why in the world would you do any of these things wrong? It's ridiculous. I understand people still do, but it's still, remember, I've always spoken about this. It's always mystified me as to how, if you're next to a farm, it's important to have these books out there so you can read them and know what the rules are. So I think for that application, it's brilliant, because I would never have known that if my cow, now I'm not talking about one of my exes, I'm talking about if my cow went, if I had a farm and my cow went and charged some of the grass from my neighbor's farm, that's actually theft. So what I've learned about theft, and it's actually helped me with even though it's not, it's very old fashioned a little bit, it helps you with the current in your day-to-day activities, because I'm very, very wary now and very careful of doing anything which might involve some sort of level of theft. I'm being absolutely scrupulous and meticulous on that area. And I think Bava Kamma has helped me with that, because I come from a very bad background in the fact that I came into this world being a slight crook without a doubt. And it's cleaned me up. And I think Bava Kamma has helped tremendously as well. So it's helped me on a personal growth as well. So, and thank you so much for everything you've done for us, Damon, because I know it's a hell of a lot of work to do this. You've done an outstanding job. In fact, Charles Joffrey told me that he watched that show, the whole show, with the one where I nearly got caught a lot. And he said that you're absolutely outstanding. And I concur. I think you've done a magnificent job. You put hours and hours into this, to take something where the subject matter changes on a daily basis, and you have to continuously prep and give it over and deliver it, especially when you've got some health issues as well. I think it's absolutely remarkable. So thank you so kindly. Really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure, guys. I want to thank you very, very much, because I think quite a few things that I picked up is that sometimes the cases aren't always when somebody goes off track. Some of the cases deal with two sides of opposite sides. And in the beginning, when we did the daf, I remember Gavin saying, I agree with this particular rabbi, or Gavin or Arthur would say, I agree with that particular rabbi. And I think the mental stretch or the spiritual development was to say, how do we see it from another point of view in order to compromise? Is there another way of looking at it? And the perfect example is if you look at intellectual property. So if you're the one that's developed software and you've put years into it, you don't want somebody to just pirate that software, because at the end of the day, you're losing out on revenue. I mean, I feel less bricks if it's a huge billion-dollar corporate company like Microsoft. But I'm saying generally, if somebody put a lot of time into it, into software development as a small user, they built a database, and we don't appreciate that. They need what you call intellectual property registration to make sure that they have to be paid for the use of that software development. However, this is where it works to the contrary, is that what if you're a big billion-dollar pharmaceutical company, and instead of curing diabetes, you say, let's make billions by maintaining a person's lifestyle on diabetes by giving them insulin, and making sure that even if we could cure it, we don't, because there's no money in curing somebody. That's the first day they teach in medical school. is that you lose your database of clients when you cure them immediately. It's the same thing with psychiatrists. That's why you can sit there for years. So what I'm saying is, what happens if you've got millions of poor people and the drug companies hold to ransom that intellectual property by charging an exorbitant amount, and have cost the world millions of lives when it could have been distributed and saved lives, and they're still going to make billions, but not trillions. So this is where intellectual property has its limits, and there should be a certain amount of protection. So finding the sweet spot to where legal case is no longer in moral best interest, and when it is, that's part of Bava Kamma and every other Gemara of learning what the parameters are. And it's been a privilege to learn with my friends. 730 shirim, guys. This is the 700.
Is that so? Eh? Including tonight?
Yeah, excluding certain special shirim we've given. But for the Gemara,
so let's say 740.
So we do daf Shavua because basically it's been 6 dafs, 6 shirim a daf, basically.
And you never uploaded some of them also. So probably 750, I'd say.
Maybe, yeah. I did a lot of editing because some people have Tourette syndrome. Some have told off-color jokes, but that's what made it so fun. I think one of the Rabbonim wants to speak to us as a group, which I was trying to arrange. We do it at the end of every chapter, so for sure, we should do it at the end of Bava Kamma. So we'll find out when it's good for you guys.
And Arthur, remember what we've discussed on a regular basis.
No,
Arthur,
tell me.
how do we need to have kavod and speak correctly to the Rabbonim. Arthur.
Okay.
Okay. Arthur's in a mood today.
I just want to add something. I want to add a comment. It's just my observation, is that I think sometimes these guys don't always have an opposite view. I think they often take the opposite side so they can have an argument, so they can have a debate.
I agree
if you look at Rava and Shmuel, they're always opposing. It's impossible in the real world to have two Rabbonim always opposing. Take Hillel and Shammai. There had to be times when they actually agreed. So they always opposed each other. So it's. I honestly think that sometimes they did agree, maybe, but one would take the opposite side to try.
And Rava and Abaya. I agree that the whole reason that this was done was for spiritual and intellectual development and discourse, to expand our world viewpoint. That's what I think.
Yeah, and it helps to explain the Torah, because you can't, it's very difficult to understand it otherwise. And like this, you can actually see the meat of what's actually inside the Torah. Yeah. And obviously with ArtScroll today and with guys like you that are able to understand it perfectly, because it obviously is a little bit easier than the old days when it was purely in Hebrew and Aramaic. But still, you have to be incredibly bright to do it. And it's been wonderful just listening to all these arguments. Whether they hold by that opinion in real or not, it doesn't matter.
Maybe these arguments actually never occurred always as court cases. Maybe some of them were just set up to illustrate certain spiritual lessons.
I think so. I think half these things probably didn't happen because the community, I think, at large generally was quite religious. But we don't know, because you remember there was stuff we were talking about where they were having who was it? I think it was Simcha was saying it in it. So it's not this book in what are we doing? Soita. I was there on Sunday night, and we're talking about the immorality that was happening at that point in time. It was quite intense, and that's also I missed it. So that was real. I mean, they wouldn't have spoken about that otherwise. So I don't know. I mean, guys were naughty, even though they knew that Hashem existed to the nth degree.
So
he spoke about immorality because he said that the Soita, they were looking at doing away with it at one point, because they said, why should the husbands do it? Because they're immoral too. They're not. You can't take your wife to be for a Soita test if you're immoral, because then it's pointless. It's not going to work. It's only going to work if you've been ideal. And the children were actually